May is coming up fast, and you know what that means? We're about to get a bunch of new games. And since that happens every month, we take it upon ourselves to detail some of the biggest releases. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, big game releases you might want to check out in May 2023. Starting off with number 10, it's Lord of the Rings Gollum. So Daedalic Entertainment has pretty much spent an incredibly long period of time attempting to make it so that we can experience the world of Middle-earth from the perspective of Gollum. So that means navigating through the various locations, some familiar, some new, utilizing a set of skills that make sense with a little creepy crawly guy that talks very strangely. You're going to be doing a lot of sneaking and a lot of climbing from the looks of this game. So while maybe we don't consider the graphics massively impressive, that's kind of been a thing that everybody's talked about throughout the development of this game. They're certainly not bad, and they definitely look better than they did a few years ago. I'm sure it'll be interesting and thrilling for Lord of the Rings fans to experience some specific locations too. That said, I don't think it's gonna knock your socks off from everything I've seen. However, it is using next-gen tech. For one, we're going to see haptic feedback in this game so that Gollum's actions are a little more tangible. Like, I've seen a few games that utilize haptic feedback pretty well. And again, the graphics are a little simplistic, but they are going to include ray tracing, which definitely would have been possible if this was a last-gen game. Essentially, this is a game following Gollum prior to events of Lord of the Rings. However, it's not the film continuity, it's the book continuity, because Daedalic has a deal with Middle-earth Enterprises specifically. Now again, this one's been delayed a lot. Like, this is a long time in the making. It's finally happening. Lord of the Rings Gollum is landing on the PlayStations, the Xboxes, and PC May 25th. At number 9 is the System Shock remake, a remake of the classic AI gone bad in a space station, part shooter, part detective story, part emergent gameplay, partly complex system-driven simulator. A highly ambitious game for when it came out. So, the original System Shock was released back in 1994. It was a critical darling, but never really got as popular as, like, Doom. That said, it's one of those games that helped define the first-person shooter genre. The original game had incredible scale, a really interesting physics system, and was one of the first games with true 3D environments. If you've ever gone into a deep dive on what Doom actually is, it was kind of a trick to be 3D. Not super important right now, but it did get a lot of praise for that. It had a really cool story about a rogue AI, but if there's one thing it really got criticized for, it was the control scheme, which, I mean, we were just treated to one of the best remakes of all time, the Dead Space remake, which although didn't need the kind of improvement over controls that System Shock, in my opinion, does, I do think that it's reasonable to assume that they've done some ironing out of the controls. Like, this remake has been in development for a long time. Like, originally they were doing a full reboot, ran a Kickstarter for it in 2016, anticipated a 2017 release date. That didn't happen because of feature/scope bloat. Paused development in 2018 to reassess, and I've been working on it since then with the intent to remake the visuals from the ground up to be modern, but otherwise have minimal additions and simply adapt a more modern control scheme and bring more quality of life type updates to the gameplay. Stuff like removing unnecessary mazes from the level development, just keeping it so that the game can kind of move along in some areas that didn't age so well. For me, everything I've heard about this remake is the right stuff. It's what I want to hear for a System Shock remake, because it's a game that I absolutely love, but also rarely go back to because, again, there are aspects of the game that are incredibly tedious that if modern principles were applied to wouldn't be. And I think that's the promise of the System Shock remake, which will be coming out for PC on May 30th. You'll see ports to previous and current generation consoles later on in the year. At number 8 is Amnesia: The Bunker. Developed by Frictional Games, the creators of Soma and Penumbra Overture, this game is set in a World War I bunker, and we're a French soldier who is alone in the bunker with only one bullet left in his revolver. I apologize so much for that. I'm sorry. It had to be done, though. Anyway, it would hardly be an Amnesia game if the bunker was not filled with terrifying creatures. So it is. They're stalking up and down the dark corridors, and you gotta use any tools and weapons you can get your hands on to survive. Sounds familiar, right? Well, so this version of Amnesia is taking a lot of cues from the most recent Resident Evils and maybe a little Alien Isolation from what I've seen. There's a monster that you basically have to go around and avoid, which, yeah, Alien Isolation. You've got the simulation elements, using the environment in various ways, crafting different items, and of course the need for stealth because you got a big old monster hunting you. Amnesia has some pretty linear routes, and it doesn't look like this retains that. There's really only a singular goal, which is getting out of the bunker, and apparently that can be gone about in many, many different ways. The Resident Evil influence comes in with the kind of smaller but open map, limited inventory, and obviously the way that it handles safe rooms. But from all accounts, it also looks like it really does a good job retaining the amnesia-ness of the game. So I'm pretty interested because I think that those are great places to draw influence from. And Amnesia has been a pretty quality franchise up until now. Amnesia: The Bunker comes to PC on May 16th. At number 7 is After Us, a new action-adventure platformer from Piccolo Studio that takes place on a desolate world where the souls of the fallen are all trapped in baddie quote-unquote vessels. You play as Gaia, the spirit of life, and you gotta find those lost souls and return them to the Mother's Ark. Now, obviously, this is a very rudimentary version of the story, but I think what people are probably more interested in is that the game's mechanics and movement look a lot like Journey. Now, I am always kind of chasing the dragon in terms of trying to find another game like Journey. Journey is a totally unique, interesting thing that we've seen things that have taken influence from, but never really a spiritual successor to. And this kind of looks like that. Although, it also brings some systems that are more akin to a regular action-adventure platform game. Now, there's combat, puzzles, it's semi-open world, but in all actuality really looks like it fundamentally wants to hang its hat on the Journey hat-hanging device. This is a bad metaphor. You get the point though, right? After Us is set to release on Xbox Series and PlayStation 5, also on PC on May 23rd. At number 6 is Warhammer 40k Boltgun, a game that looks like it's really focused on bringing a slightly older set of gamers into the Warhammer 40k universe. An arcade 90s FPS style shooter that looks old school in the best possible way. Like, you're playing as a literal elite space marine, and your mission is to sweep the galaxy of demons of chaos and other baddies that you find on various planets. So, not exactly an original narrative per se. Literally your standard 90s FPS story. But that's exactly what we're talking about here. It's a large-scale boomer shooter, as they're calling them. It does look like they have some exploration elements mixed in, and maybe they've done a little bit more to make the gameplay loop more addictive than the bog standard go back and play Doom type run. And yeah, it's a Warhammer 40k game, but like, I also honestly couldn't care less. It just looks like a delightful boomer shooter type game, which I've really enjoyed the resurgence of. So, fast-paced retro shooter with really stylized, cool graphics. It just looks like a ton of fun. It's coming to the PlayStations, the Xboxes, Nintendo Switch, and PC on May 23rd. At number 5 is Miasma Chronicles, a new game from the Bearded Ladies, previously responsible for Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden, a pretty darn well-received turn-based tactical RPG, which is, surprise, surprise, what Miasma Chronicles is. So in a post-apocalyptic America, there's three forces: humans, robots, and this mysterious force known as the Miasma. You put your feet in the shoes of a guy named Elvis, you got a robot brother, and you want to learn what the hell the Miasma is. You want to learn all about its existence and, I don't know, probably make the world better in some way. I'm kind of excited for this just based on the fact that it's another game from the Mutant Year Zero people. The tactical turn-based combat of Mutant Year Zero is great. I expect them to utilize that and probably improve upon it in this game. There's also a whole lot of exploration that's apparently involved. The world looks pretty interesting to me. Miasma Chronicles is coming to the Xbox Series, the PS5, and PC on May 23rd. At number 4, appropriately, is Age of Wonders 4, the new 4X strategy game in an ongoing series that's known for customization. So Age of Wonders 4 is not reinventing the wheel per se. The classic mechanics are essentially intact, with Paradox claiming it's adding some twists like heroes being able to establish outposts as they explore, which adds a kind of new layer to the gameplay. But as with previous entries, the standout feature is probably going to be customization, which basically allows you to accomplish different feats in very different ways, and attempts to place emphasis on endless replayability. Great for a strategy game, like that's the goal. That's where you want to go with these things. It also includes what it's calling this Pantheon system for unlocking the various new features and story maps and a lot of stuff to avoid repetition. Again, Age of Wonders, great strategy franchise, the latest releasing on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC May 2nd. At number 3 is the Outlast Trials, a first-person stealth horror game where you're a volunteer who has to survive physical and mental tests led by the Cold War-era Murkoff Company. In some ways, it kind of seems like if Outlast was Squid Game, if that makes sense. Although, like, visually, it looks nothing like Squid Game, just looks like Outlast. This is an up to 4-player co-op game that developer Red Barrels has labeled as paced more like a TV show, whereas other Outlast titles were paced more like a movie, which implies more events over a longer time period. I mentioned Squid Game, and although they haven't mentioned it, it's kind of what I get the vibe of. Although Squid Game's more of a dystopian situation where normal people are competing in something, and this is obviously a more horror-oriented experience. These trials sound kind of like messed up scenarios you'll have to get out of that involve Outlast-style monsters and stuff. This was a game that was going to come out in 2021, but faced a lot of development difficulties due to the pandemic. And we don't actually have a full release date. We have the early access, which, hey, that's fine. Finally going to get to play it. Outlast Trials landing in early access on PC May 18th. At number 2 is Redfall, a new co-op shooter from Arcane, one of my favorite studios out there, the guys behind Dishonored, Prey, and Deathloop. Set in the titular town of Redfall, Massachusetts. Hey, guess what? There's a vampire infestation, and you're gonna try to stop it. Everything I've seen indicates that it's got elements of Deathloop, Dishonored, Prey, all of that arcaneness, but mixes in some ideas from D&D as well as Far Cry. It's co-op, there are supernatural powers, so again, looking back at their catalog of games, you know exactly what that means. If you're not up for playing it in co-op, you will be able to play it solo, but co-op is also going to feature crossplay. Now, keeping in mind that doesn't mean a whole lot considering the game is a Xbox/PC exclusive. That said, I'm extremely excited to play it when it lands on those platforms on May 2nd. And finally, at number 1, it's Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, if any of you happen to see my, frankly, underappreciated analysis of the new trailer, you all know how hyped for this game I suddenly am. Like, I was excited for it, but that last trailer just definitely changed this game for me. Like, it was, oh yeah, that's neat, more Breath of the Wild. And now it's like, oh, Tears of the Kingdom. If you want a more in-depth talk on exactly what this game looks like it's going to be, go there. And even though Nintendo's been pretty secretive about this game in the years-long lead-up, there's still plenty to know. There's a lot of really cool new mechanics that have been added. They've been particularly touting Fuse, which allows you to craft items, weapons, and even, like, create vehicles. And although that's not necessarily exactly what I want to combat the weapon degradation features in these games, like, again, I've said it a lot of times, I just like it so that I would have the ability to get some items and repair it. Apparently, Fuse does a lot to counteract it. Other than that, what else is there to say? It's the same Hyrule, except for there's now Sky Islands and tons more ground to cover. And I'm willing to bet the tears are going to just flood the kingdom and send us back to Skyward Sword, although I don't know. Nintendo might surprise us. Everything looks very cool. Ganon is back. Demise might be back. They might be the same thing. They might not. There is so much that I am excited to see, because I think unlike basically every other Zelda, we might get some answers. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom comes exclusively to the Nintendo Switch, obviously, on May 12th. Hogwarts Legacy release on the previous generation of consoles, specifically PS4 and Xbox One. At this point, we've talked a lot about Hogwarts Legacy, so you probably know what the game is. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.